How's it going, guys? Nick Sepp from theScore eSports here with Moses, who just came up from casting what was a very back-and-forth game between two bitter rivals in the women's tournament, CLG Red and Team Karma. He just briefly talked me through that matchup because I know that some people might have thought that going into that one, CLG Red was heavily favored, but Karma sure gave them a run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, heavily favored, but maybe not realizing the history. I mean, those two teams have done battle before. They're both from North America. There's a little bit of, blood between them, a little attitude, so it always brings those heated matchups. A couple of the past women's tournaments have been like traded championships between the two of them. And one of the big things as well is that Team Karma has a coach that actually participates in the professional men's division over in North America, XP3. So he helps them out a lot, and that kind of helped them get, that leg to make that kind of a challenge.
I understand that Flowsick was actually here for them this time,
Yep.
potentially standing in. So, the fact that they went to overtime, CLG, obviously one of the most popular teams here. Mm-hmm. The fact that, Flowsick, also a familiar face, helped them perhaps with the switch over in the coaching just for this event?
Yeah, it was something with XP3 is actually French, so he's working on getting his citizenship, I believe, in the United States. So he was restricted from travel. So okay. Flowsick just came in his place, but all the prep work leading up and monitoring the practices and everything is all XP3, as far as I know.
All right. Let's move on to the men's, since we just had obviously the very intense grand final yesterday between Luminosity and Fnatic. Let's talk about that matchup and the very insane overtimes. Did you expect Luminosity to come this one and not only just challenge Fnatic, but push them possibly to the very brink in maps 1 and 3?
Yeah, I mean, we actually expected Luminosity to take at least one map off of it. I know most of the other analysts actually predicted that Luminosity would win. I still think that Fnatic is just too strong in too many different areas. They're incredible. Yeah, I mean, those comebacks were monstrous. But Luminosity had a great edge, and they always, the thing about Luminosity is they improve every single event. They always step up their game in some way. So, I mean, if you look at that trend, the next one they should win, right? But it's just waiting to see that team who can actually counter Fnatic throughout a whole map. Just crazy. But Luminosity is hitting a really good peak right now.
Let's look at the event as a whole. From the group stage or the bracket stage, can you sort of pick for me a team that really impressed you or had some games really impressed you, and perhaps a player that might be one of your your MVP from this event?
I mean, MVP for this event, I mean, I guess, I don't know if he'd be an MVP, but there's one player on Luminosity, Taco, who stepped up really, really huge. Him and FNX both, but especially Taco, who's been getting some flack. Like, during this rise of Luminosity, Taco's been that player that's always been, seen from the community as underperforming, as not fulfilling his duties, and he stepped up in a big way, carried them through those matches against Fnatic in the grand final. He had a sick event, I thought, so that was really cool to see. In terms of teams, I mean, Mousesports was really, really impressive. Just not able to, I mean, they lost in such a heartbreaking fashion, just not able to close those out, much the same as Luminosity. And then NIP, I was surprised at how well they came into this event looking, because they've been struggling for so long, and they just recently added Threat as their coach, who's, a legendary in-game leader, but just to see the amount of work that he's put in a short span of time that allowed them to look even just, much better than what we've seen recently.
We're seeing a few new coaching additions in Europe, as you said, Threat. There was Roban for, obviously, FaZe Clan. Yep. What do you think that sort of is there sort of the idea of a coach who's becoming more accepted in Europe, or just in Counter-Strike in general, more necessary in some ways, or is it just sort of those two teams who are looking for a little bit of leadership?
It's going to become more and more common. It's starting to get required, because now what we see with this coaching position is that 5 players on the map, you used to have these, the in-game leader who was expected to have a little bit less of a fragging impact. Same with, you used to have a support player who was kind of expected to have a little bit less of an actual impact statistically. But now with coaches, you have someone who can in-game lead from outside the game, so there's no real reason to have a drop-off on, your 5th player in the server. And I mean, that's one of the strengths of Fnatic, is that all 5 of those members can carry at any point. And you see it in other teams now. Luminosity as well, with Taco emerging, is very, very similar. But that coach is just adding so much firepower to teams, and you need to be able to match that at the highest level. So if you don't have a coach who can in-game lead, and you have that, that in-game leader, he better be damn good tactically if he's not going to be stepping up in the kill department.
Just a few more questions specifically about IEM Katowice. We saw, obviously, on Friday, which was a very long day, had four best of threes. How do you, as a caster, after casting just tons of games, make sure that you stay at your peak and make sure that you're still bringing enough hype and enough energy throughout such long days for you personally?
Yeah, well, I mean, at an event like this, it's great, and at other stadium events, it's amazing because the crowd is usually there with you. Now, on Friday, it was so long that we didn't really have a crowd for the last matches. It's a combination of having fun. That's why it's so important, the crew, like the entire talent crew, when you're relaxing in the green room between games, you're on your break, cracking jokes, having fun, keeping energy level up that way, being able to just like hang out with some friends, maybe taking a nap, during a best of 3 that you're not working. Mixture of like coffee and Red Bulls in there as well, but a lot of it is just, it's just kind of, as cliche as it sounds, a lot of it's just love of the game, and even if you can't get that energetic level, like the games have to deliver that for you to get that hyped. The crowd helps out, but just being able to watch the game tactically at such a cool event, it helps in its own lift up the energy.
And for you, before a big event like this, or for example the upcoming major, what's sort of your preparation like in terms of watching reviews and making sure you're up on stats?
Honest to God, it's almost like zero at this point, because doing so many events, like that's the prep. I was just in Barcelona 2 weeks ago for ESL Barcelona, and then I was in Ohio for the major qualifier and flew straight here. So 3 weeks in a row where I was casting events. That doesn't really leave a lot of time for actual prep. Before the major, I'll have about 3 weeks off, and that's an event where you can get a lot of prep work in, watch some VODs, take some notes on teams, look up some statistics, and just kind of build. For me, I write it down all on paper, because that just helps you kind of think through different aspects of teams that you want to talk about, and you kind of form an opinion on these players and teams that you can bring into a conversation. And then you mix that with other analysts that are really smart with the game, really on top of their stuff, and that just helps you develop your own opinions more. Just talking to these guys helps you prepare for events.
Now you mentioned mixing with the other analysts. One of the duos that obviously you work with quite a lot at some of these events is Anders and Semmler, the very famous duo. How's your sort of, when you guys work as a 3, how do you feel like the dynamic balances out, and how do you fit into something that they've had working for so long together?
We're really good outside of the game as well, just in terms of not even just Counter-Strike, but just talking about anything, just conversation about anything under the sun. We get along really well, so it's actually kind of easy. When I first started casting, I actually casted with them, not in a Tricast, but both of them individually at like one of my first events. And the thing about their casting style is it's very much, you don't feel like you're casting. It's kind of like you're just broadcasting a conversation to the audience. So it's just very easy and comfortable to kind of slip into that. When we do the Tricast, obviously, like it's just all about, it was one of the great pieces of advice Semmler gave me early on, was just know your role. If you're brought into color cast, stick to color casting, because then you make your co-caster kind of, useless if you're slipping into the play-by-play. So when I'm casting with them, those guys, whenever there's a clutch moment coming up, whenever there's any possibility of something exciting happen, I just don't even talk. Just don't even go into anything tactically. Let them carry the excitement. It's really easy. Just focus on the tactical stuff.
Super interesting to hear about some stuff that maybe people who are watching might not necessarily know about, like that dynamic. Let's move to North America and the upcoming major, since, as you did say, you were at the MLG offline qualifier.
Yep.
What sort of, and we saw 4 American teams come through actually, Splice, Team Liquid, Cloud9, CLG. What do we sort of think of their performance at that event, and how their level might be in a few weeks' time at the MLG major?
It was pretty shaky, some of these teams. I think Cloud9 still got a lot of work to do despite the individual skill. Splice was the big surprise. Really energetic guys that can be dangerous and like best of ones. But the rest of them, it's tough, because while they all qualified and they all beat good teams, and you want to say they did good, with Liquid, with CLG, with Cloud9, these guys are now at the point where it's not good enough just to qualify. They should be expected to qualify, those 3 teams at the top of NA. So, it's all judged based on what they do in the major at the groups. They have to get out. I thought they played okay. They played well enough to qualify, and that's the big thing, because now they have that month break to start practicing. So it's all about just getting that break to be able to get to a new level for the major.
I was speaking to Atticus a little bit earlier, and he said that one of the things that really impressed him about Splice is that, they were the first team that was really screaming, they were yelling, they were playing their own game.
It was incredible.
Yeah, do you think that the North American team, and then obviously other teams started picking that up and doing that a little bit as well, do you think that the North American teams benefit from like getting a little bit of energy in themselves, and more than perhaps other regions might?
Not necessarily more than other regions, but I think like you look at the Brazilians and they, Luminosity, Tempo Storm, those guys always talk about how much emotion they play with, how passionate and excited they get during a match. But it's all about finding a way to kind of channel that into the gameplay. If you're going to get screaming and get out of your seat and yell and get energetic in the middle of a match during rounds, the drop-off from that if you're playing poorly is just incredible, and it actually is like a double-edged sword. It works against you. So you have to find ways to be like really, really smart about it. It's tough to sustain that kind. Like, it's crazy to think about that energy level required to get that excited and that hyped over the span of a best of 3 over maybe 3-4 hours. It's so hard to sustain that. So you got to be really cautious about it. But I think other teams, they have that same passion and energy level and excitement, but you just have to find ways to kind of, focus it on the game and make sure it's helping you actually perform well.
Let's end just on an overall view of the major. As you know, one of the premier NA experts, first NA major. Can you sort of give me the lay of the land in terms of where we expect certain teams to end up, and maybe a dark horse that teams should keep their, other teams and viewers should keep their eyes on?
It's going to be really interesting. I mean, I'm still going to take Fnatic to win. I don't see any way they can actually lose, and I hate saying that. Luminosity could have a really good event as well. Dark horse team, I mean, at least from North America, you got to say Liquid, I guess, if you'd consider them a dark horse, because they have a lot of attention on them, but like they still haven't proven anything, and they had a really, really rough qualifier against a lower quality of teams that'll be at the major. The really interesting thing about the major for me is that with the way the group draws work, with Virtus Pro and Envy like slumping pretty badly right now, there could be a group where a North American team kind of almost not gets a free pass, but they're have a great chance to get out of it just because other teams aren't performing as strong. So that'll be really, really interesting to see, but definitely looking forward to Liquid being that kind of top team in North America. Hopefully they can grab that, and Cloud9's always a danger. If they can get some stuff together, they're going to do well.
Okay. Well, look to hear from you in the coming weeks, of course, in ESL and, of course, at the major. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today, Moses.
No, thank you.